Eagles. Eagles.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome into a Football Friday edition of Birds 365 here with John McMullen and Zander Krause. Great game last night on the TV. Eagles bye week this week, so no weekend of football for Eagles Nation, but there will be obviously a big weekend of football in the NFL, Week 5.
I encourage everybody to watch football. Come on, this is an opportunity to see the other teams.
And hopefully it started last night. That was a pretty good game last night, Johnny Mac. How you doing on this Football Friday, brother?
Yeah, I watched that overtime thriller. I think you see some of the offense starting to pick up. I think that's going to be a trend continues now that you're by the glorified preseason. I think all the talk about defense is going to slowly morph away, and it kind of started last night, just the shootouts. Kirk Cousins over 500 yards passing for those who didn't see it, and could have had more. There weren't a bunch of key drops down the field, but good game. And the Eagles have played those two teams, and that's when I talk about the expectations, the soft bigotry of low expectations versus the entitlement of the expectations that seems to be in Philadelphia. The assumption that the Eagles are much better than those two teams last night, which I think the vast majority of the fan base has, it ain't true. Now, are they better? Yeah. Should they win those games? Yeah. But you got to bring your A game to beat teams like that. And obviously the Eagles weren't able to do it against either one. And here they are, at the bye way too early, but probably needed from just a mental health standpoint, to be honest. For them, they got to fix some things.
Johnny Mac, that game was hell of a game last night. Kirk Cousins slicing and dicing. So he's an underrated quarterback, Kirk Cousins. We talked about that a little bit off air. 500 plus yards. That reminded me of Tom Brady's Super Bowl 52 performance. That obviously Eagles Nation.
Bigger stage, but
but still 500 passing yards.
Anybody who's watched this show knows I tune out when Jody used to say Kirk Cousins can't. There are some things I just tune out on people. Like when Jalen Hurts goes, you don't know what you don't know. Like in the league, that guy can play quarterback. But you need other things. And like my biggest criticism of Kirk Cousins over the years is, guy's the best businessman in the history of football. Took over from Sam Bradford, Andrew Brandt's business Hall of Famer. Guys milked every piece of money he could get, and that has hurt the teams he was on previously, and it'll hurt this team as well eventually. Other quarterbacks are more malleable and willing to build up the supporting cast with the end game in mind. So I think that's a valid criticism. But for those people who say he can't play quarterback, man, what are you watching?
You don't pass for 500 yards in the NFL without
being. It's not even about the statistics. It's about understanding what's going on, putting the football where it's supposed to be, running an offense. I'm in the Jason Kelce category. Now, Jason was joking. Everybody took him the wrong way when he was like, but I say all the time, this is not a statistical based game. This is not about 500 yards passing. He does that. That's the first time he's done it. That's only happened, 13 times in the history of football. 500 yards, 4 touchdowns. 13th time in the history of football. That doesn't happen every day. So that's a big day. He's thrown for 400 yards multiple times. 300 yards is like, that's a walk in the park for Kirk Cousins. It's not about the numbers. It's about what Tom Brady said. Are you in the right play? Are you getting your team out of the wrong play and into a right play? Are you distributing the ball where it's supposed to go on time? He does that far better than 90% of the quarterbacks in the NFL. and he's been doing it for a long time. But it takes other things to win. But that doesn't mean he's not good at his job, because he's a business Hall of Famer. He's good at that too. But yeah, I would criticize him for that. But for those, who oh, he hasn't won a Super Bowl. Oh, he hasn't done that. I mean, yeah, I tune out.
He's a damn good quarterback. I mean, he looked tremendous last night, obviously, and I think you brought up some good points there. How about Baker Mayfield, though, John? I think he's looked
very
tremendous.
good as well.
I mean, he looks really good, man, to me. He's one of my favorite stories. I liked Baker coming out of college. I wasn't a huge fan of the, overwhelming version of his attitude, but I think he's dialed that back to a great level. Now he's got a great competitive fire. He seems more mature. I think he's a father now, and I think you can see some of that coming through. I'm impressed with his turnaround. Great story, and he looked really good last night too. Obviously, he didn't get the win, but that offense is in good hands, I think, with him.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. I mean, two of the stories are Baker Mayfield, and even more so Sam Darnold of the, and it takes time. It takes time to get to a level that Kirk Cousins is at. And you got to go through some hiccups, and you got to, and everybody is so impatient now that the moment you have some of those hiccups, they want to get rid of you and they want to move on. They want to go to the next big thing. And then they got to go through the same hiccups again with those guys.
Right.
And you've seen it in Chicago, most notably. I mean, they just can't get it right because they don't have the right people around the quarterback to lift up the quarterback, but also because they don't have the patience and all that kind of thing. But and guys like Mayfield, had to bounce around a little bit, gets his second opportunity, even more so. Darnold gets an opportunity with a better supporting cast, and all of a sudden it looks like they can play. Now, still early, we'll see if they can keep up the consistency. But if you're mentally tough enough to handle the bad times and to get that second opportunity, certain guys can take advantage of it.
Yeah, especially if they have the right skill set. He's looked really good. John, this may be the Negadelphia in me. By the way, welcome everybody in this morning. We have a great show planned. We'll have a guest, Scott Grayson, in hour number 2, and I'll get Johnny Max 3 things to fix over the bye week for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Only 3?
As well, yeah. Well, if you want more, you can add more. And 3 things to double down on, if there is anything to double down
Core
on.
values, double down.
So 2 and 2 here going into the bye week. Appreciate everybody. John, this might be the Negadelphia in me, and our viewers might not like me saying this, but I got to say it because it's on my mind when I watch that football game. I struggle to believe that our football team, the way it is right now, would be able to hang in a game like that. I don't know if Jalen Hurts can run an offense like that. Now, I know he doesn't because that's not his style of play, but my point is that
they can win
those style of plays much more conducive to winning in the modern NFL. I know you point out that Kirk Cousins needs, the clean pocket and all those things, but I don't know. I watched that game and I'm like, shit, man, this team, that doesn't look like the Eagles. When I watch the Eagles, they don't look like that. And I don't know if that's the Negadelphia in me or what, but.
Well, the Falcons don't typically look like that. So, I mean, you're looking at somebody at their highest, and then, you're thinking about somebody at their lowest coming off
it's fair.
A game with Paris Campbell and Johnny Wilson and John Ross and even Jahan Dotson. I mean, he's rolling out there with Drake London and Darnell Mooney and Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, I mean, he made Kadero Hodge, big catch for Hodge there. Not like he went.
I mean, he's over, and he was only in because Drake got banged up on the play before. And if you look at the game, it was overtime at that point. Atlanta's running their 87th offensive snap. Tampa Bay had like 53, so they were gassed. There's a bunch of contextual things there. It's not like Hodge is great. He's just fast and perfect throw. I mean, give Kirk credit for the throw because Zion McMullen was all over it, and he had to throw it in a very small window, and it was perfect. And, then it was just a race, and the guy with the fresh legs is fresher than the guys who've been out there for 87 stinking snaps.
Yeah,
There's a lot of context to that, but yeah, I mean, the Eagles can win shootouts. They win shootouts all the time. In fact, that's why they're built to win shoot. But they do it in a different way. They're not going to throw for 500 yards.
no.
But as I said, you're going to get a bunch of all schedule stuff with the Eagles. You're going to get a bunch of plays where, something is made out of nothing with the Eagles. And this is the Eagles with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. They can beat anybody in a shootout, but it's not going to look like that. It's not going to look like 500 yards passing. It's going to be more well-rounded, bunch of different things involved. But they can win shootouts. They're equipped to beat anybody in a shootout when those guys are out there. But when they're not, it's not good.
What do you think is more valuable in today's game? Being able to win from the pocket like that, or has it gotten to a tipping point where
I think it's easier to like that.
What's that?
I think it's easier to do it like that if you have a quarterback that could sit in the pocket and throw the football like that. It's easier when it's clicking. But again, everything's got to be clicking. You have to have the playmakers. You have to have the pass protection. And then, that's the easiest. That's why people do. That's why Jeffrey Lurie thinks the way he thinks, because that's the easiest way to do it. So when everybody's talking about, you got to grind it out in the running game, you're just decreasing your margin of error. If you can throw the football like Atlanta was throwing the football, it looks easy because it is. But it is when you're clicking. It is when all those things are together. But one piece of the puzzle falls apart, and your left guard can't handle Jalen Carter, then that's up in smoke. So, but when it's clicking, that's the way you want to go. But as I said, there aren't many quarterbacks that can throw the way Kirk Cousins does, number one. And there's seems to be becoming less and less of those heavy volume throwers who can just sling it all over the place. But you also got to be smart, as Tom would often point out. And Tom Brady and Peyton Manning are the best examples of just almost always getting their offense into the right play. Doesn't mean it's going to be successful, because then you talk about execution. But the more times you have your team doing what they're supposed to do, the more opportunities you're going to have to be successful.
Good stuff, Johnny Mac. Great game last night. NFC, I mean, it looks like now, those are the two teams that we lost to. They look like they could be NFC competitors. Both looked pretty good last year. Both moved to 3-2 on the year. So a good game last night and a couple good games this weekend that we'll talk about toward the end of the show today. Scott Grayson, as I mentioned, coming up in hour number 2. So we'll talk to him, and appreciate everybody in the chat this morning. Crowley, Stephen, Daz, Slagger, appreciate all you guys. Joe Whip, I see you, brother. Jimmy, appreciate everybody being here this morning on this Football Friday with no Eagles game. John, Eagles are 2-2 going into the bye week. You always go to the family parties, and your uncle's like, what do you think of the Eagles? If somebody asks you, what do you think of the Eagles right now?
I walked to the other end of the room, but well, I talk about the Eagles enough, so I don't want to talk about them with people on the street. But I mean, the first thing is I focus completely on the defense, because not that there's not problems with the offense, and we'll get to the quarterback, and I think there's significant problems there, but the defense is bad right now.
Yeah.
And you can say new coordinator, but it's not a new scheme. and it's supposed to be the best version of the scheme they've now been playing. This will be the 4th year. So I don't want to hear too much about that. And there's a bunch of guys not playing. Everybody's focused on Bryce Up. He's one of them. Nakobe Dean, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Jordan Davis to a lesser degree. A bunch of guys not playing up to what they're expected to play at. And that manifests itself into what you've seen so far, which is an defense that isn't very good. And do they have the personnel to fix it? You know, when people talk about the talent on this team, it's generally offensive talent. And when you're talking about defensive talent, it's all projection. Guys haven't lived up to their, oh, this guy's a first round pick, this guy's a first round pick, this guy's a first round pick. All right. All right. You know, just roll out the footballs and everybody falls down and says, oh, here's a first round pick. You can see that. They're competing as well.
Up and down though. Like you go back to week 3. If the week 3 game happened going into the bye week, we would not feel like we feel right now about this defense. Why are they so damn?
No, but that's why I encourage everybody to watch football this weekend if they like football. If you know, I encourage you to spend time with your family. But if you like football and you got nothing else to do, I encourage you to watch football and look at the rest of the league. One of the things, people are hyper focused on their favorite team and they don't pay attention to the opponent. And styles make bites. And the way New Orleans plays is helpful to the Eagles. And not many teams play the way New Orleans plays. So the Eagles could roll out a bunch of their 5-man fronts, a bunch of their, even roll out a 6-man front for the first time to help stop the run. And they didn't have to worry about getting spread out because that's not what New Orleans does. Now, most teams spread you out, like those 2 teams last night. They spread you out like most teams in the NFL in the modern era. And that means you got to play more nickel. And that has been the bugaboo for the Eagles, that personnel grouping. Both phases, both stopping the run and stopping the pass. And it equates to no pass rush, no tackling, soft coverage. There's not much else when it comes to execution on defense. If you can't rush the passer, you can't tackle, and you're playing soft, you get what you get, what it looked like in Tampa Bay. So the vast majority of teams are going to play more like Tampa Bay and Atlanta than New Orleans. Not everybody. I mean, Cleveland's coming out of the bye is more of a Shanahan, old school Shanahan Kubiak team, because Kevin Stefanski was with Clint Kubiak and taught Clint Kubiak earlier in his career. So that might be helpful coming out of the bye. Not to mention the fact that Deshaun Watson's not playing well, but styles make bites. And right now, the Eagles are not good when their nickel defense is on the field. And that's not good because your nickel is going to be out there over the vast majority of the season. It's going to be out there. Best case scenario, 65% of the time, and probably more. So they got to fix that.
How do they fix it?
Well, you know, I was thinking about personnel changes because everybody wants personnel changes and blah, blah. There's not much they can do. Offensively, everything's locked in when guys are healthy. Everything's locked in. You're not making any changes.
You need to.
Defensively, I mean, Cooper DeJean is the obvious one, and I expect him to start coming out of the bye. Vic seemed to foreshadow that. Maybe that helps a little bit in run support because he did show in a very brief period Vic likes to run blitz his slot defenders a lot. He hasn't been able to do that with Avonte Maddox as much. Cooper in that final preseason game showed some signs that he could do that pretty effectively. But you might even take a step back early when it comes to coverage as you get through those starting cost hiccups. But you got to do it. And I think the Eagles should have done it earlier so they'd be over it, to be honest. But they got to do it. They got to make some kind of changes. Where else can they make a change? Look, it's not going to happen with C.J. Gardner-Johnson because of his contract, but Sidney Brown's coming back. You got to mix him in right away in preparation, whether it's as, the third safety, big nickel, dime. I'd get him involved right away to get him up to speed because there's going to be some rust you gotta knock off. And then if things continue to go as badly as they are, at some point you got to think about changing things down the line if he starts to prove that he could help. And the same thing with Nakobe Dean. If he continues to play like he's playing, whether it's Jeremiah Trotter Jr. or Ben Van Sumeren, and again, it depends on developmental aspects behind the scenes, which we're not privy to this time of year. Maybe they're not ready and you got to bite the bullet and all that, but you're not good enough right now. And then you just got to hope to get players more consistently. I've said they have to tap into the one trick that Bryce Huff has. Yeah. Stop worrying about making him a 3-down player. That's over.
Yeah.
That's over. That's over until next spring. And then you can try again. It's about winning games now. It's about preparation for the next opponent now. It's about utilizing what you do have right now. And they got to at least try. And that means a bunch of wide 9 and obvious passing situations. And if you can't do it, it can't do it. And then you go in a different direction. But you got to try. Not a lot of firm answers other than.
I mean, the whole look, everybody was using the excuse for the offense, and I get it. You're missing your top 3 players. Nobody was missing on that defense. They just didn't show They just didn't show up. So, the fix on that side is not so simple. And everybody's like, oh, go get an edge rusher. I'm like, there's nobody out there to get. Max Crosby, everybody's tweeting about. I'm like, boy, that'd be great.
Day 3 pick for Max Crosby. Yeah. Huh? Day 3 pick for Max Crosby.
Yeah, right. Well, I will say, the Raiders, I don't think they're going to move on from Max Crosby, but there's some of that where the people think that they're going to blow it up because Devontae wants out.
Yeah, well, I think people, and now it's gotten, in the old days, no way. Just absolutely 1,000,000% no.
Right.
But I think people have this mentality because that's what teams in the NBA do, or that's what teams in baseball do. It's gotten more like that in the NFL. There's younger GMs who are willing to do more. Howie's, started that as well. But people don't trade 26-year-old edge rushers who are all pros, unless there's something going on like Devontae Adams or Hassan Reddick, and they're just so unhappy. And I haven't heard that about Max Crosby, but I don't cover the Raiders on. But just because Devontae Adams is going to get traded, and he wants to go play with Aaron Rodgers again for obvious reasons, that doesn't mean they're trading an all-pro edge rusher. I mean,
yeah, I don't see it either.
Yeah,
I'm looking at the Eagles' next couple of games, right? Coming out of the bye week, because I saw something come out. Eagles have the easiest strength of schedule for the rest of the season.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just the NFL. Everybody's always competitive, so Browns, Giants, Bengals, Jags. See, I think the Jags are scary because they're almost playing now with nothing to lose. You know, you're 0-4.
Everybody's scary. That's the thing about the NFL. You look
Yeah.
at these things, and it does look good on paper the
It
next
doesn't
4
look that good on
weeks.
paper. You got the Cowboys and Commanders, Commanders always play as tough, and now add in that they have a great quarterback, or who's a quarterback who's playing great. The Rams, I mean, I don't like that matchup. Ravens, they are getting hot. You know, Lamar Jackson's looking back
Yeah,
to form.
I don't like that matchup at all.
Not at all. The Steelers late in the year, and then you have Cowboys and Giants and Commanders. Obviously, the last 3 games to close out the year. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, comparatively speaking, again, it's comparative to the rest of the league.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy on paper the rest of the way. I mean, one, the NFC East is not very good this year. Like you know, the Giants are not good, and the Cowboys have taken, it seems like, a big step back, and Washington has taken the step forward, and we'll see if Jaden Daniels and how quickly people adjust and try to make him do things he's not comfortable with. And certainly not, you know, in a weird way, I like that matchup for Vic Fangio better, because he's gonna do better against inexperienced quarterbacks than experienced quarterbacks.
Who are the
With that,
Commanders you said?
yeah,
Yeah.
Vic Fangio is going to do better against
Gotcha.
inexperienced quarterbacks. The guys who know how to play, they're going to find the soft spots in the zone and just pick you apart, as you've seen. I doubt Jaden Daniels is at that point yet, but we'll see. That it's a far more interesting matchup, and there's a guy who can do things off schedule that blow up everything. So it's sort of a give and take. And he's tremendously gifted, obviously. And I say that about any young quarterback. They don't know how to play yet. So that, to me, is a good matchup for Big Fangio. He can take advantage of that. Some teams are better off starting with Washington. Some teams, I mean, Cincinnati, we all thought would be a contender. They don't look like it. Cleveland, we all thought would be a good team. They don't look like
Burrow.
it.
You can't count out the Cincinnati.
I'm not counting them out. You can't count out anybody.
I know. But my point is, I think that some of that's factored into like that we have the easiest schedule. Like, I don't think Jacksonville is the worst team in the league, but they're 0-4, so they're probably coming up as the easiest team to play right now.
Yeah, but they're not. In many ways, they're not if they show up with their A game. That's the thing.
That's what I'm saying. So I think the easiest schedule thing.
What I always say about the NFL, you can talk yourself into anything, because everybody's got players that can beat you.
Right.
So if you're gonna say, I'm saying compared to other teams, they have an easier road. That's all, because these are all NFL teams. Carolina jumped up. Who did they beat? I forget already. But, you know, as soon as they put Andy Dalton in the game, all of a sudden they're competent. They beat the Raiders. All of a sudden they're competent. And they played well. They played okay against Cincinnati. They're a different team when Andy Dalton's out there. Again, he knows how to play. That's not as good a matchup for Vic Fangio as a young quarterback is. The Rams are far worse than anybody thought, but that mainly is due to injuries, and that's a ways away. We'll see where they are injury wise. Their season could go off the rails pretty quickly because they're so banged up. And I think they got the Packers this week, so they're probably going to be 1-4. And then obviously, you know, they might go off the rails. So everything's dependent on time and place, but it doesn't look as difficult on paper as some other teams. On the other hand, you know, when the vast majority of fans looked at the early season schedule, you said, "Oh, Green Bay's pretty tough." Well, they won that game. Atlanta, they're going to beat Atlanta. Oh, Atlanta's they lost that game. New Orleans, that was a give and take. Difficult place to play. They won that game. Tampa, they'll beat them. They'll beat Tampa this time. They got waxed.
I think Tampa's going to be legit this year.
Yeah, they're a good team. They're what they were last year. I don't think they've improved much.
I think Baker has improved.
I think Baker has improved, but they have some, you know, you saw some of their issues last night. Now, they don't have Antoine Winfield right now.
Right.
So, you know, that's their best player. but their running game is not. Probably Eagles fans think
weak running game for them for sure.
Yeah, they have some issues, but they're a good team. They're a borderline playoff team. If they play well, they're going to be in the playoffs. If they play poorly, they're not going to be in the playoffs. They're in that mid-range where most NFL teams are. And it's still too early. They're in very good. They would have been in very good shape if they won that game last night. They would have been 4-1, and everybody would be talking them up. And that's the rate. They were 1 second away from being 4-1. If Drake London doesn't get down when he gets down, and they're able to get on the field, spike the football, kick the field goal. And by the way, the guy missed 2 field goals, had to kick a whatever it was, 54-yarder to tie it. They're 1 second away from being 4-1. That's how tight this league is.
Yeah, great stuff, John. We're gonna get to our first commercial break, and then we'll do your the big three, the 3 things Eagles need to fix and 3 things to double down on coming out of the bye week. 2 super chats, John, real quick. Let's get to them. M. Martin, thank you, brother. Appreciate it. He says, more Graham and Sweat on early downs. Like you said, John, Huff is a wide 9, 4-point stance, one-trick pony. Can't set the edge either in the run. Like to see Nolan and Huff on obvious passing downs only. I think that's a good fix right there to start with. John, your thoughts on what Martin said?
Well, I agree with Huff completely. Nolan's kind of a weird guy. He's actually better against the run than he is
he's been setting the edge decent.
Pass rusher. Yeah, and that was his story at Georgia. Everybody looked at his athleticism and his size and said, well, this guy's a pass rusher. So actually was really good against the run for whatever reason. And I'm not saying he's really good against the run here, but he's capable. He's a lot better than Bryce Huff. So I agree completely with Bryce Huff, with Nolan Smith. He's got a little bit more versatility. He can play the run a little bit.
Yeah, we'll see what they end up doing with him. Overall, though, John, underwhelming still from Nolan Smith. First round edge rusher draft pick. I mean, you want him to start to contributing in terms of getting after the quarterback, and I don't think he's shown much of that. So we'll see what he does after the bye week. Alexander Harris checks in. Appreciate it, brother. Man, that was some good quarterback play last night. Like the decisiveness of the QBs was special. Why can't we have that? Alexander's with me in the Philadelphia camp this morning. You watch a great football game, and instead of like normal people, we're like, wow, what a great game that was. You know, can't wait to watch the Eagles again. We're like, fuck, why can't the Eagles be like that?
Well, I don't know. Look, I don't know Alexander, and I don't know, but there's a lot of people in this town that would crap on Kirk Cousins. So, you know, you guys been playing for 13, 14 years, whatever.
Think about, John, is we got a pretty damn good offensive setup. I mean, I think, and most quarterbacks in the league could have a great deal of success in our system, and that's the truth. You got a top 5 offensive line. You got 2 top 12.
Well, I agree with that. I agree with that.
You got a star running back. I mean, John, it doesn't get much better than the skill players and the offensive line that we have in Philly. It doesn't get much better than that.
No, I agree with that. But there's also Jalen Hurts has added to the Eagles' success as well. Like I get to these points where, you know, half of the time I get killed because I'm willing to criticize Jalen Hurts. And then the other time I think people take it too far and I got to defend the guy. And people have taken it too far the other way. Like he can't play quarterback. Again, I point this out all the time. The greatest stretch of Philadelphia Eagles football came with Jalen Hurts as a quarterback. And I mean over 91 stinking years. I shouldn't say that. Ray Didinger would get mad at me because I'm not going back to 49 and 50. But certainly in the modern era.
Who was back then? Steve Van Buren and
certainly, and it's meaningless because it's a completely different game. So, yeah, but certainly in the modern era, the best stretch of Eagles football happened with Jalen Hurts from, you know, the 2-5 start in 2021 to 10-1. It was unbelievable. Offensively, success-wise, the best offense in Philadelphia Eagles history. And he was running it. So, you know, I think people have taken it too far in one direction. There's a lot of things Kirk Cousins does that he can't do. There's even more that he does that Kirk Cousins can't do.
Yeah, but what's more valuable?
Well, I think I'd rather have Jalen Hurts than Kirk Cousins.
I don't know if I can go there.
Yeah, I can. And I'm the one who's dependent. I don't want to hear these Kirk Cousins people. My God. The guy can play the quarterback position. He's very smart. He knows where the football is supposed to go. He can read defenses. He's high level at all that kind of stuff. If you're playing a big Fangio defense and you're not getting a pass rush, he will kill you. Maybe the most accurate quarterback in football.
Yeah, he's definitely toward the top. You know who else is up there in accuracy is Jared Goff, who's
Jared's
very accurate. Yeah,
very accurate as well. So there's a bunch of good, but don't give me this revisionist history about either player, because on this very show I would have to argue and explain to people that Kirk Cousins was a good quarterback to the point of ad nauseum, to the point of, at some point I said to Zander before the show, I tune out when people say stuff like right now this week. I've gotten a lot of, this is obviously Nick Sirianni's offense and not Kellen Moore's not running this offense. Like I tune out at that point. I go, at some point I try to explain, no, it isn't. The context of the lack of motion in 1 week had to do with the wide receivers. Even if we want to believe that, they're still up 100% in motion. Yeah. Kellen Moore is running the show. Kellen Moore is running this offense for better, for worse, indifference. He's running this offense. It is not my job to validate people's incorrect thoughts. And so if you're going to keep going down that route, I'm going to tune out. I can't convince closed-minded people. Same thing with Kirk Cousins. For many years, I'd say, actually, he's a really good quarterback. He doesn't win in prime time. Doesn't win a Super Bowl. He's not out there by himself. It's not quarterback versus quarterback. If it was, he'd probably have a few. But it's not. And Jalen Hurts is a better fit for this team. He's a better fit because he's younger. He's a better fit because he's more athletic. But if you're just talking about arm talent, Kirk Cousins is better. If you're talking overall, I'd rather have Jalen Hurts. Kirk Cousins has better arm talent than Lamar Jackson. I'm not going to say he's better than Lamar Jackson. I mean, and Lamar's at a different level than Jalen Hurts. I'm not saying that, but there's different ways to go about things. And if you're just talking about strictly arm talent, yes, Kirk Cousins is better than Jalen Hurts. But if you're talking about overall football player, no, come on. Jalen Hurts is better.
You said Jalen fits here better. You think Jalen fits here better with the type of receivers we have?
Well, I've already seen them perform at this outrageously high level. How do they get back to it? That's the question.
Okay.
How do they get back to it?
Yeah.
And by the way, he's regressed, and that's a bunch of that is on him, which we'll talk about.
Well, let's do it real quick then before the break, because we talked about it with Les Bowen on the show yesterday, and I've been critical of Jalen. In the last couple of weeks, people have been upset with me in the chats and everything. So I'm not out on him. I'm just trying. I just want him to be better. Where are you on Jalen Hurts? And lay it out.
I would say if I were an Eagles fan, I'd be frustrated about Jalen Hurts. And I can't necessarily explain. I told everybody, Dan was out there. Dan Orlovsky was out there with a good clip that I was talking about yesterday. And one particular route, basically, he's that it doesn't matter if it's Nick Sirianni or Shane Steichen or Brian Johnson or Alex Tanney or Doug Nussmeier or Kellen Moore or, Nick Saban or Lincoln Riley. Everybody teaches it the same way. And he's been doing it the same way probably since high school. And He's not reading it correctly. Like, what the hell is that about? Where he's not executing
that first route, right? You're talking about that first play from scrimmage. Yep.
Or he's not at least executing it correctly. It's like, what is going on there? Like, yeah, but that's if everybody teaches something, if that's a staple route of every offense in the NFL. And everybody teaches it the same way as far as reading it and what you're supposed to do. And it's supposed to be, you're supposed to read it inside out. He did it the opposite way. Why? And that's what was perplexing Dan, who's played the position at the NFL level. And people say, well, he's not very good. So what? That doesn't mean he doesn't know how to do it, how to read it. Like what is going on there? And I wish I could answer that question. I don't know if it's lack of confidence, if it's not trust in the receivers, but in theory, it was Dallas Goedert, the only one you should have had trust in. Was the one where the ball was designed to go to.
I know. It's not like it was, Paris Campbell that the first read was. It was your best player, your best guy in the passing game that day.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of stuff that Jalen's got to take accountability for, and it's got nothing to do with Nick Sirianni or Brian Johnson or Kellen Moore or Doug Nussmeier or anybody else you want to throw into the mix. Like that's the kind of stuff that Kirk Cousins ain't struggling with.
Yeah, traditional quarterbacking.
Yeah. So part of the blame goes on him, no question about it. And the regression, part of it goes on him. Maybe he's lost some confidence. I think, confidence is a big thing in the NFL.
Yeah, it is.
And you start to struggle and, it has a big impact on players because everybody has bad games. And you start to have bad stretches and it starts to snowball. And you start, the indecision starts to grow. It can impact the best players. Everybody goes into slumps. Think of it from a baseball standpoint. Doesn't matter if you're a 330 hitter, you're going to be in a slump at some point. How do you get yourself out of it?
That's a specific. Go ahead.
I think Jalen's in a slump right now.
That's a specific play there. Anything broad that you're concerned about with the quarterback? Like talking about broad point of view,
Indecision. He's at the bottom of the league. And it's interesting because I knew at the time it was going to be a problem. I literally knew the moment. And I remember talking about it with Tim McManus. When Doug Nussmeier mistakenly uttered 2.3 seconds.
Well, yeah, I mean, Hurts is the slowest quarterback in the league right now to release the football. We had Sal Palantonio on last night who talked about it again.
Yeah. There was no way he was getting to 2.3 seconds. That's why I thought, Doug probably shouldn't have uttered that. And Kellen quickly corrected it on his next press conference. But, got to be better than wherever he is, 3.1, wherever. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And at this stage of his career, when we just talked about experience and we talked about guys getting second chances, like Baker Mayfield, like Sam Darnold, it should be getting better, not worse. Now, again, if you look at it in the small context of Tampa Bay, maybe it's a little bit more explainable because you don't have good receivers on the field. But he's the same way with maybe a little bit better, but he's the same way with AJ and Devontae. Right. The ball's not coming out on time. In the first week against Green Bay, every single turnover-worthy throw was because the ball came out late, too late. The ball didn't come out on time. And that is my biggest issue with Jalen Hurts. It seems at a time it should be getting better, it seems to be getting worse in his career.
Yeah, got to get that fixed, no matter what. And then the other thing I think people point to is, we lose AJ and Devontae Smith, and we act like we literally rolled out Eagles fans who were waiting outside the link. I mean, these are still freaking NFL receivers that we're putting in the game.
Are they?
Olamide Zaccheaus has already as many catches this year as he did the entire season last year. I mean, they're using the guy. They're finding the quarterback's finding him. Last week, I mean, Jalen couldn't find anybody, and I think people point to that, and I think they're right. I mean. Doesn't mean I don't think he can turn it around eventually, but I do think it's fair to be concerned.
Oh, it's fair to be concerned. But I also, on the other hand, like, the assumption that Kellen Moore is going to scheme up Paris Campbell and John Ross, who hasn't played a game since 2021 and just got here this week.
Just in a third-round pick for Jahan Dotson. Was he not on the field? Dallas Goedert, you tell me all the time, he's one of the top tight ends in the league. Was he not on the field?
Well, and Dallas got the football significant, and I got some lawn stuff going on. Hopefully you can't hear it. But,
that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas was involved, and Dallas had a big drop early in the game, which, by the way,
that was a big drop.
That was a huge drop early.
That could have gotten Jalen in rhythm a little bit too.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, the 3 and outs evaporate. That's not a talking point, and that's complete execution. That was a perfect throw to your best receiver, and he dropped the freaking football.
Yeah.
So, that factors into it as well.
Yeah, that's not on Jalen. I'm with you on that.
Not on Jalen at all. So the standpoint, but what you're talking about, and that's, elevating bad receivers. Olamide Zaccheaus is a heck of a lot better than the 3 guys they rolled out there.
What's it, Jahan Dotson, the dude we traded the 3rd-round pick for?
Well,
that was a 4th-round pick. I'm not saying that doesn't just mean.
But again, that's what we're talking about. Nolan Smith was a 1st-round pick. All right, what has he done?
Nothing.
Exactly.
A goose egg.
And there's some potential still there. Hopefully, you can tap into it. But he's also been
a quarterback. I mean,
he's also been here a short time.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, it would be great if Jalen trusted him and got him the football. Maybe he would.
Why would he
find
trust
rhythm and get?
And I'm not
confidence.
saying he shouldn't trust him. But look, you have to trust. If they're on the field, you have to trust them. Now that's easier said than done.
Was it Les Bowen who brought that up yesterday? He's got to stop needing to trust everybody and just start letting it fly.
Yes, I mean, if they're playing, you got to trust them.
Yeah.
Now, if you're a quarterback in the NFL, like Devontae Smith, of all people. The interception in the end zone against was that Atlanta, I guess. Of all people, that's a trust route. And the quarterback got burned by trusting the receiver. And then you get tons of crap if you're the quarterback. But that's part of the job, dude. And people know. So what are you worried about? Like, what are you worried about that the people that don't know? Like he says it all the time. You guys don't know what you don't know, however he phrased it. And he's right. But the people around the league know what that route is. Nick Sirianni knows what that route is. Kellen Moore knows what that route is. They know it's not his fault. So what's he worried about? Other than some idiot screaming on WIP. Who cares? You're supposed to ignore the rat poison. If they're on the field, you got to trust them. And if they make a mistake, believe me, the coaches aren't going to blame him. So, hopefully he's not worried about outside voices. That would be a very bad thing. But, if they're out on the field. But again, and this goes to the motion stuff as well. Jahan Dotson just got here a few weeks ago. John Ross, again, hasn't played. Now, he was here in camp, but hasn't played an NFL game since 2021. Johnny Wilson's typically not a big part of the game plan. And so that's why the motion was down, because they're not as equipped
I don't care about
to
the
do it.
motion. I'd like the quarterback to just elevate somebody, and he's just not. He hasn't done it yet. I mean,
you can't elevate. your point is, again, numbers. And I don't think numbers are, who cares? But anyway.
My point's not all numbers. My point is more that there's quarterbacks in the league who face adversity at the wide receiver. Jalen's not the only one. And they elevate guys to make them look like better. Everybody's like, oh, their wide receiver 4 is better than our wide receiver 4. I'm like, are they? Or did the quarterback just get him involved and they looked like they could catch?
Well, that's a fair point. You bring up Hodge last night. I mean,
yeah.
what did Kirk Cousins do?
In overtime, everybody's thinking, oh, shit, is Atlanta going to get in here? Boom, very next play.
Well, and I think to your trust point is the better example of that. Look, he's on the field. Kirk Cousins trusted him. You know, do you want to have Drake London on the field? Of course. But he wasn't on the field. He was on the field. That's where the ball was supposed to go. He trusted him to make a play. He made a play.
Yeah.
That part is probably legitimate. As far as elevating, look, if Hodge had to play 75 snaps, you know, again, you're talking about a high volume thrower. So maybe the numbers are there, but then the numbers become hollow and it becomes my old 20-point score on a bad NBA team. Who cares? Somebody's got to score 20 points. But at that point, who cares if you're not playing effective football? So if you're talking about truly elevating guys, the best example of that would be Aaron Rodgers. And he ain't Aaron Rodgers. Few people are. So, I mean, could he be better? Yes. But this is a really bad group of receivers. And I blame that more on Howie Roseman. And I'm talking backup receivers.
I'm sure. I mean, if the way we talk about him, it sounds like there's dudes all over practice squads across the league that are better than these guys. Go freaking get one. I mean, what?
Well, they got them. They got their own. And, you know, but they're very hesitant. Excuse me. Very hesitant to play, it seems, young guys who maybe have a little bit of juice, like a Hodge, who can run by people, who can do some things from an athletic standpoint. And maybe that's an organizational problem because they seem very hesitant to do it. And people will point to Johnny Wilson and say, well, he's a rookie. Yeah, but he's got a very specific role because he's 6'6", 231. He's a blocker. He's got a very specific, they don't use him.
Well, then shame on Howie, because if your entire season depends on
you can blame that. You can blame that on the coaching staff.
I mean, are we talking about dudes that are literally, you know, trash can wide receivers that aren't worthy of playing in the NFL? Then why the hell are they even on the team? I mean, your season shouldn't be built on if AJ Brown goes down, you're toast. And that, by the way, that was why we traded for Jahan Dotson. Wasn't to, you know.
Well, yeah. Well, he shouldn't be toast, but you know, I don't know what Jahan Dotson is at this stage because he didn't do anything in Washington with a huge opportunity. And obviously, but he just got here. So I'm willing to give him a little bit of time. Boy, I don't like ripping people, but Paris Campbell and John Ross should not be on an NFL team.
Right. So then the blame, if you're saying that to me, which I'll take your word for it, I don't normally trust your opinion on the game of football, then that's a Howie problem. I mean, you can't, I mean, you lose AJ Brown and you don't.
Why is it, you know, when you're elevating people, why are you playing? And I knew this was going to happen. And for people that were listening and paying attention, I knew John Ross was going to get elevated. And I'm like, you got Danny Gray on the practice squad. They got 5 guys on the practice squad. He's former 3rd-round pick in San Francisco. For those who don't know, Marcus Roseme Jackson, you know, another Georgia guy. I don't know if they can play, but I know they're young. I know they got some juice in their legs.
The Georgia puppies, the Georgia Chihuahuas.
Yeah, maybe not the Georgia guys, an example, but so we'll use Danny Gray as an example. I don't know. I'd rather give him a chance. But again, maybe he's not performing in practice. But I find it very hard to believe, looking around the rest of the league, that you can't find an athletic guy who you can try to develop to make him a 20-point scorer on a bad NBA team at least. And I think that the Eagles have had trouble developing receivers for many years now. And I think people gloss over it because they traded for AJ, a finished product, and they drafted Devontae, who's close to as finished product as you're going to get coming out of college. And those are the two exceptions. For many years, we talked about Carson Wentz's receivers. I mean, it had to go out. They had a very short window with Alshon Jeffrey, obviously, who was a very good player. But he was a finished product. Nelson Aguilar was a disappointment. Had some, played a great Super Bowl, but overall, I think everybody would agree was a disappointment as a first round pick. The Travis Fulghams of the world, for years, still today, people talk about Greg Ward because he could catch the football. I mean, Greg Ward, you're still talking about.
Would Greg Ward have contributed more than Jahan Dotson last game? It's fair to wonder, Johnny Mac.
They're still talking about him. And great guy, Greg Ward. Tough not to root for. But, I mean, yeah, you got to be better than that. It's been an organizational problem. And that's another hit, by the way. Because it goes farther back than Nick Sirianni, but I will say this: Nick Sirianni's a wide receiver. In his own life, he was a wide receiver, and he was a wide receiver coach, obviously, early in his career. Should be able to develop some of these guys a little bit better.
Add that to the list of things that, people can wonder about next year. Let's get to a couple super chats here, John. We're barely going to get our segment, and I teased all show. We're rambling here. Daniel Bigelow, what's up, brother? Great to see you, man. Look at this. He says, hey, y'all, great to listen to y'all again. My community was destroyed by Hurricane Helene, and I haven't been able to watch any football. Still no power. I'm getting a little phone service so I can watch. Daniel, prayers up, man, to everybody, to you and to your entire community. I hope you are safe. I hope all of your loved ones are safe, and you can get through this time together. Thanks for sending us a super chat. I feel like I should be sending you the super chat, but thank you, man. Thanks for being here, and I hope everything goes well for you. John, if you want to respond to Daniel.
Yeah, man. I the Asheville, North Carolina stuff, that's interesting because, I mean, it's so far inland, you don't think about them being in that kind of danger, and it tells you the devastation of storms like this. It goes the right way, and it's really certainly sad. And I hope everything gets back to normal as close as possible. It's funny because I heard so many. I've never been to Asheville, North Carolina, but I've heard so many good things about it, and it's become one of the trendy places to live. And I thought, yeah, maybe I'll look at Asheville when it is time to retire.
Yeah, get some better taxes.
Yeah, well, that too.
Jersey ain't fun with taxes.
No, Jersey's not fun. Jersey's not fun. And by the way, it's our fault because we keep voting for the same people who keep raising our taxes. So
yeah, that's true.
But
truer words have never been spoken. Love it, John.
It's hey, you get what you pay for, so to speak. But and we don't get what we pay for because we pay for a lot. We don't get anything.
We pay for a lot and don't get shit.
Yeah. But anyway, now we're really going off the tangent. I hope everybody's okay, but really sad situation.
Daniel, thanks for checking in, man. I hope, like I said, I hope everything is all right, and I appreciate you being here. You are one of our best supporters. I've seen you for many years, so thank you for being here, checking in with us. Hope you're all good down there. Let's go to James Carver checking in. Trust is an excuse, in my opinion. The only times trust really plays a role is on a timing route when you're having to throw blind effectively. People use it as a crutch on plays like throwing one open. That doesn't require trust to do. It's a fair point by Carver. John, your response to James Carver there.
I'm going to disagree with James. I mean, the first rule for any receiver is don't fool the quarterback. Literally the first rule.
Right.
And it's got more to do, like, by the way, speaking of the game last night, they had a bunch of good angles. Amazon's doing a good job with their
I think Amazon has improved their game. I just don't like their crew. Ryan Fitzpatrick, to me, he drives me nuts on the broadcast. But anyway, we don't need to go on that tangent.
I don't listen to the pregame, postgame stuff, but so I can't speak about the crew. But I'm just talking about the camera angles. Like, they had a bunch of great camera angles that showed Cousins getting the ball out of his hands when the receiver hadn't even making his final break, certainly not having his head back. And those are the timing, the trust routes that you're going to trust the receiver's going to be where he wants to be. And he's top level at that. And it is trust. But, even when it comes to alignment, even when it comes to where you're supposed to be on a particular route, whether it's 7 yards, 8 yards, 9 yards, down to that type of attention to detail. First rule, don't fool the quarterback. Be where you're supposed to be. So, yeah, I think trust is a very big thing. Now, I'm not saying it's an excuse. I think Jalen Hurts, if they're on the field, your assumption as the quarterback has to be that these guys are ready, and I gotta let it fly. And too often, I think he doesn't do that. So it's not an excuse for his play, but it is a big thing. The trust between receivers and quarterback.
Fair point. James, thanks for the super chat, man. Appreciate it. Anthony Wilson checks in. Zander, Big Sills is starting to get in your head. The defense is bad, but when talking about the offense, you have to add context. Anthony, I'm sorry you don't like what I have to say. That's why John's here to talk us off the ledge. I'm just airing out my concerns, brother. I think, you're talking about a team that is tied to a quarterback for at least the next few years. I think it's pretty obvious he's regressed from his peak. Will he get it back? Hopefully. But I'm not going to not call out the regression. And Sills has been telling me it for 3 years, and I told him he was crazy for 3 years, and now he's starting to look more and more right as Jalen continues to show us who he is. But anyway, you're free to think what you think. I appreciate you being here. John, your response to Anthony.
Well, let me read that again.
I guess it was more addressed at me, but
Zander, Big Sills is starting. Yeah, well, I don't know what he's saying, but I think Zander thinks for himself. But yeah, that's a Zander question.
Yeah. The defense is bad, though, Anthony. Appreciate you being here, brother. Lucius checks in. Lucius, thanks, man. Appreciate him. JAKIB Legend member right here. So thank you, brother. How can you elevate people that don't get open?
I don't know. Aaron seemed to do it. There's certain guys who seem to do it. Again, the big thing with Jalen and a big thing with Kirk yesterday is throwing guys open, which I don't think is a strength of Jalen's game. Open in the NFL is a lot different than open in college, and that's one of the things a lot of college quarterbacks have problems with, because you are throwing to so many open receivers, visibly open. And you can't run an NFL offense just waiting for a guy to clear, especially against good defenses, because they're not going to clear. And when they do clear, there's going to be somebody really close to them. You see the game. If you're watching last night, Atlanta won the game on a throw that had to be perfect, because Zion McMullen was right there to knock it down. And it was perfect. It was a perfect.
Zion McMullen's got me wondering how good Tristan McCullum will be, because he's the one who knocked out Drake.
Zion's having a good year too.
Yeah, he's playing good. He was throwing. He throws the body around too.
Yeah, he's a good player, and that's one of the reasons they got rid of Carlton Davis. Hopefully Tristan can come there, because the Eagles might need a safety, by the way. And I'm not talking about Reed Blankenship. But, Sidney Brown's coming down the pike as well, so we'll see how that shakes out. But, yeah, to a certain degree, yes, I don't think the receivers are very good, so I'm kind of torn on this one. But should they be a little bit better? Probably. But I don't even know if the Eagles are pushing the right buttons. Like, I think that's a legitimate criticism you might have with the coaching staff. Like, why are you bringing John Ross? Why do you have 5 guys on the practice squad? Well, 4 guys. And you're bringing John Ross back off the street because you need somebody to play. Why? What are those guys doing? Doesn't make sense to me.
Should we skip the break so I can get your top 3 things to fix? Let's skip the break. Good, John. you got them. You got your top 3 things this team needs to fix coming out of the bye week. We still got a lot of Eagles Nation and still thinks this team is, can make a big run. They can fix all this. They still got 13 games left, a lot of season to go. If they're going to fix it, John, what are the 3 things they need to fix?
Well, I think the vast majority starts with the defense. I do think the offense is going to be a certain level as good of good as long as it's healthy. I think your concerns with the offense start in situations like last week when they're not healthy. Then you got a bunch of concerns.
Yeah, well, turnovers too, but yeah,
yeah, and certainly turnovers would be the number one concern. But I think the overriding factors are basically, other than turnovers, I think they're all on defense, to be honest. Every single one of them. And I would think pass rush is number one. They need to fix that somehow, or at least get better, at least get to an acceptable level. I don't think that the pieces are there to have a great pass rush. That would be number one. I don't even talk about the coverage because that's what it is. It is what it is. We've seen it for 4 years. I'm tired of talking about it. This is what it's going to be. And then the tackling aspect is when you talk about Nick's core values, I joked about it. Every single one of them failed in Tampa Bay. And certainly fundamentals was the biggest. 15 missed tackles. You got to get that down to 7 or 8 at the most. And you can argue that's a bad tackling day. But 15 is absurd. That would be number 2. And then, does personnel count? Just this team is overrated personnel-wise. I mean, from the vast majority of people. Certainly defensively. They're clearly overrated now. There's so many players on this team that are overrated defensively. But this is not the time of year to make wholesale personnel changes. So I don't know how worthy it is to talk about. So you just have to get these players up to their ceilings. And that's why I talk about with Bryce Hubb. All right, you know what he can't do. Let's see if he can do the one thing he was able to do with the Jets. Let's see it. How do you fix Sydney? How do you fix Nakobe and CJ? I don't know, but if they don't get fixed, you got to start thinking about other directions. That's how bad it's been. Nakobe has a bunch of missed tackles, 6 or 7 in the season. I think CJ's at the top of the league. I think he's first.
Leads the league. Yep.
True media, he's not first, but he's right up there, second or third. PFF, I think, has him first. His passer rating allowed is in the 130s. He's allowed more touchdown passes than anybody else, tied for that lead, although Tampa may, after the big game last night, that might skew things. It hasn't been good. I think because of the season he had here in 2022, certainly people expected more. Should they have? That's a different question.
John, a notable thing that you didn't say, and maybe that's because you don't believe it's one of the top problems, which is perfectly fine, but I do want to get your take on it. I listened to a segment, I think it was right after the game on Monday that they had this segment, but it was Rex Ryan and Damian Woody, and I'm blanking on the third guy on the panel's name, with Mike Greenberg, and they were all majorly concerned about Nick Sirianni, message not getting through.
Right. I don't care.
You don't think Nick is a big problem at this point for this team?
No. Jason Kelsey called him the best meetings coach he ever had. I don't care. Now there might be something to the shelf life aspect of it. You know, when you hear something from the same person, from the same voice again and again and again, sometimes you start to tune out, and maybe he's coming to the end of his shelf life. But as a whole, I just mean as a whole, like if you're talking about messaging as an NFL team, you're not very good. You know, you're not very good. You know, you just, you know,
which could be a problem in itself.
yeah. I mean, what's he going to do? Newt Rockney it? Vince Lombardi with it? Yeah, rah, rah. You know, everybody doesn't like his high school Harry act. You know, hey, go motivate Jahan Dotson to not be incompetent. I don't know. You know, go get good players, Howie. I'm going to turn that towards more of Howie. Now, if you want to blame the coaching staff, blame him for not maximizing the talent they do have. I think that's fair.
How much of a leash does Dotson have? Because we're still saying he just got here. It's been like
a little bit. He's got a little bit of a leash.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
I'm not giving up on it. I shouldn't have said that about Jahan Dotson, but
dude,
I'm not giving up.
We sent a 3rd round pick for him. I'm going to say it if you don't.
Well, they overvalued it. Nobody was giving up a 3rd round pick.
Yeah,
Adam Peters. Yeah, for all the talk about how Adam Peters fleeced.
Yeah, to your credit, you said that on the day they traded him. Why is a division rival sending him to Philly?
Well, yeah, but people said, "Oh, they're getting a 1st round pick for a 3rd round pick." It's like that's not how it works. It's like a car, man. As soon as you drive it off the lot,
yeah. But maybe worse, bigger depreciation.
Oh yeah, bigger.
What would you get for Nolan Smith right now? He was a 1st rounder too, but you'd be lucky to get a 4th or 5th back. Yeah,
6th, 7th round conditional pick at this stage. Yeah, that's why you're not looking to trade him. No.
Yeah, let's get the one more super chat, John. Before go ahead, you can finish up.
But I think Nolan still has legitimate potential. But I'm saying, if they wanted to pull the plug and they wanted to trade him, which they don't want to trade him, so I don't want to go that route. You're talking about a conditional late round pick.
Lucius checks in. Lucius, thanks again, man. JAKIB Legend member. Extra context. These wide receivers don't run good routes other than AJ and Smitty. Dotson has lost. The other wide receivers run right in to the defenders. Yeah, Lucius. I mean, that's what we've been talking about. You know, and maybe I put too much of that on Jalen Hurts, where I'm expecting a quarterback to help them get open. Where you hear people talk about throwing them open and some of those things. Maybe these receivers just aren't.
You saw it last night, man. Put on the film. You'll see a guy throwing guys open. Yeah, they're not even in their breaks, and the ball's out, and it's pinpoint where it's supposed to be. Now that's a guy playing at a high level. That's a guy having a good night. But still, you see high level NFL quarterback play. And we haven't seen that here recently.
Good stuff, Johnny Mac. Let's get to our commercial break. We'll have Scott Grayson coming up soon here on Birds 365. I'm wondering what route Scott's going to go today, John. Normally he gives a good opinion. He's got a good voice of reason, but I think Scott tends to fall optimistic.
Normally. He's more of an optimistic guy.
So I'm wondering where he is on this team. Maybe he'll talk me off the ledge a little bit right now. I'm concerned about this Eagles team coming out of the bye week. Hopefully they can get it right.
How could you be concerned, man? Cleveland, although Nick Chubb's coming back.
Yeah, right. And you're talking about the worst tackling defense.
Although I did see Nick Chubb say he's not going to play until he's completely healthy. So
yeah, that might be a bit. That was a bad injury. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a bad injury. So he's coming back. They're not playing well. The Giants, well, if you lose to the Giants, yeah, I mean, get ready, boy. Boy. But
let's just say let's play a hypothetical real quick. Eagles lose the Browns and Giants after the bye week.
No, because I don't think Jeffrey would do that. But yeah, I mean, it will be a dead man walking at that stage.
Yeah, major dead man walking. Real quick, James, I'll hit it now. I know you said hit it at the end, but I'm going to hit it now because we got a minute here before Scott gets in here, and I've already went this long. J Mac, I understand you're huff to the 9 tech for the remainder of the season, but doesn't that require Vic to to run under almost exclusively? And if so, then that weak edge has usually been bonus dropper and Vic's zone blitz schemes. Interesting take there on how that might change, what Vic is doing. Your thoughts on that, John?
No, I mean, Vic runs a bunch of different stuff. So I think everybody tries to pigeonhole him into, look, if he's in 3rd and 13, he's wide 9. He's got 2 wide 9 guys, and he might be even further. He's letting guys pin their ears back. Now, too often, they're not in that situation this season because they haven't been good on 1st and 2nd downs. So I don't think it affects Vic as much as you think it does, James. I mean, he's
got to adapt to the players a little bit.
Yeah. And he's done it in the past and he can do it again. Now, Khalil Mack would be the most notable example, but that's a little bit different because he was so good and Akeem Hicks was so good. So it was a lot easier to go off script, so to speak, because you had 2 dominant players at the same time, and they don't have that here. But he's very situationally oriented. And one of the things I thought that was going to be much better than the other versions of his defense was that, in that he will take advantage of a situation better than Jonathan Gannon or Sean Desai. They haven't gotten to enough of those situations to prove it, but I think when they get to him, if they get to him, I think you'll see it.
James, thanks for the Superman. Good stuff there. Appreciate it. Let's get to our commercial break. Before I do that, I just want to make one comment, and I know John's not going to give a shit about this, so that's why I didn't want to make him
messaging.
Comment.
Is it messaging?
No.
Leadership.
It's about the clip floating around of Mike Evans mic'd up, and Avonte Maddox is getting torched in the game, and he's asking Mike Evans, "Hey man, are you still playing video games? Like we should play video games sometimes." And I'm just like, bro. That's going to piss Eagles fans off, and it pissed me off because it's like, oh, God, man. Mike Evans almost looks at him like, yeah, I still play. It's goofy.
I would say to that, A, welcome to the modern NFL, and B, I often wonder, one of my favorite sports movies is Bull Durham, old movie for those who, and I have some of the conversations they have on the mound during the game. Yeah. I mean, people don't realize if you had first basemen talking to runners at first base, if they had those guys mic'd up, I mean, yeah, that's a big nothing burger. But I'm with you. Predictable that people take it in that direction. But
I just think, look, there's got to be a fire in these dudes to want to win. It's a competitive game. You're talking about high testosterone alpha men running around banging each other, football, all sorts of shit. You got to be fired up, John. You got to want to win.
That's what Fortnite?
10? Avonte, are you 10 years old?
Well, but again, do you want you want public relations or you want reality? That's why I brought up the movie. It's a great movie. And one of the conversations at the mound was getting a wedding gift. They're talking about because their teammates get it, and they're talking about, what should we get them for a wedding gift? I mean, obviously it's a comedy and it's meant to be funny, and it is funny, but I mean, those are some of the conversations you have. And with the Phillies starting, they're going to have, those are some of the like you think they're talking about strategy and they're talking about, maybe the girl in the 3rd row, something of that nature.
Right.
The NFL has mic'd people up and you get to hear some of this stuff, and it ain't just the Eagles. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Let's get to our break. We got Scott Grayson coming up here on Birds 365. Looking forward to talking to Scott. Real quick before I do that, BetUS, everybody. Great sponsor here on JAKIB Sports and Birds 365. Please go to betus.com.pa today. Use that promo code YouTube150. That means you get 150% sign-up bonus on your very first deposit and 125% sign-up bonus on your second and third deposits, all up to $2,000. So deposit less and bet with more. when taking, your Saquon Barkley prop bets and all the like. So good stuff from BetUS. Go to betus.com.pa. They have the fastest payouts in the industry, 24/7 customer support, and you can even get your own custom account manager to help you with your bets. So go to betus.com.pa. That's betus.com.pa. We'll be back in 3 minutes on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
He's blocked well and tries to cut through the middle. Oh!
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on Sports Grid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on Sports Grid. Score and save in Southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, Birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer three major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Heading down the shore, have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in at Ridgeville Football Friday here on Birds 365, one of the only Fridays in the next couple of months we won't have Eagle football. Scott Grayson joining us now from Fox 29. Scott, welcome to the show, man. How you doing on this Football Friday?
I'm good, guys. How you doing?
Good, Scotty. Are you getting through it after that debacle, the latest debacle, the house of horrors that is Raymond James Stadium for the Philadelphia Eagles?
Boy, it's been rare, John, when I've just wanted to turn the TV off. And that was one of the times. I mean, and I don't even know how to put it into words. So you asked, am I over it? I think I'm past it. And the Phillies are certainly helping with that, knowing that they're coming this weekend. And I think it is I looked at this. It's so funny how the schedule comes out. And one of the things, I don't know if you're like this, John or Zander, you look at where's the bye week? And I look at, is it late in the year? And I'm usually one of those guys. It's like, put it at least in the middle or later in the year where these guys can get a little rest and be ready to go for the stretch run. But man, this bye week came at the perfect time for these guys. I feel like, I'm glad they didn't have another game coming up that they quickly tried to shift into and tell all of us that we've put it behind, we flushed it, we moved on. Now, you know what? Sit with this for a little bit. Let this linger for a little bit. And, and come out motivated to not let that ever happen again. And man, I just feel like there's a lot of cracks in the foundation right now. And this house could crumble if they're not careful.
Fair point.
Yeah. I don't think they care as much, as Zander pointed out, they got Fortnite to play. So, I mean, that now to their I always talk about the players. The players can't be emotional. I mean, they have to get back to work. They have to. You can't have these huge mood swings because guess what? Next game's coming up. Now it's a little bit different with the bye week, but guys have families and 4 days off and vacations planned and all that kind of stuff. So real world stuff gets in the way. I think that's the nature of the NFL. You try to get by it as quickly as possible. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I take it from your cracks in the foundation. I agree with that. And I think this was a poorly built foundation. And by that, I mean, like, how is this not predictable to Jeffrey Lurie setting this up the way he set it up?
Well, and here's my question, John. He set it up the way he set it up, which was, Nick, you focus on running the game and the team. You keep your blinders are on, right? You're not looking at the offense or the defense anymore. You're watching the game and you're managing the game. But as these weeks have gone on and we've heard Nick speak, he talks about going into the offense. He talks about calling that fake tush push on 4th down. So what lane are you driving in, Nick? Are you staying in the lane that they wanted you to be in, or are you're doing your thing now, man? You're putting the blinker on and moving over, and you're going into that offensive meeting room. And what are you telling Kellen Moore to do? And to me, I just think there's a lot of gray area here and some uncertainty as to. We all wanted to know, okay, what's your job, Nick? He said what his job was going to be, and I don't feel like it's staying that way. And I think there's just a lot of like, okay, well, what's going on here? And I think the players are seeing some of this and thinking, I thought he was staying out a little bit and maybe he's more involved. I just think there's a lot
of Jalen. But that's my point, Scott. Like, and I'm not because I've gotten a lot of people the way you're thinking. He's the head coach of the football team. You hire a head coach to be a head coach. So again, I go back to Jeffrey Lurie. I'm not hiring a guy to do this, but don't do this. I mean, as he says, and he's right, whether you like him, dislike him or not, his name is on this product, and he's the one who gets the crap for it. So he should have the right to do whatever he wants to do. And if you're Jeffrey Lurie and you're not okay with that, then you got to show the courage of your convictions and go in another direction and hire somebody else to be the head coach of the football team and to have that kind of autonomy, which has kind of been and Zander can tell you, it's been my point from day one. This is a brutal setup, and it all starts and it all is on the shoulders of Jeffrey Lurie.
I agree with you that it's a brutal setup. It is one that Nick agreed to. But it is also, I agree with you in the sense that every NFL head coach, look, your name's tied to that ship. When it starts to sink, you're the one going down with it. And if you are the head coach, you should be able to do whatever you think you need to do that is best for the team. I think he's trying to do what's best for the team in his mind. Whether it's actually what's best for the team at times is certainly debatable.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, it's not like he wants to fail. It's not like he's coming in here going, hey, I don't want to score in the first quarter. I just don't think it's fun. Let's try to score in the other 3, and we'll just come from behind. And Jalen, let's keep trying to win despite losing the turnover battle, because nobody's done that before. He's not doing all that. Like, that's not – but at some point, and this is why I like the bye week more for the coaches, because it's self-scouting, right? They always talk about how they self-scout this week, and they see and look for tendencies and what they're doing. Man, you got a lot to try to uncover here that you're creating that is not fooling anyone. With the one caveat being, Vic Fangio isn't out there trying to make the tackles. He's trying to put the guys in position to make the tackles. Missed tackles are happening, which means guys are in position to make tackles and are not. So there's things, though, in this self-scouting that they all have to figure out and try to look at and decide what's different. And I'll tell you one right off the top from my head, because I asked myself, what is different with Jalen Hurts now versus the Super Bowl year? And there's no threat to run. There is no threat to run for him. He doesn't look for it until second half at earliest. He does not use and does not seem to have quite the burst that he did in that one year. And teams used to have to devote a spy to him, which creates one less defender in coverage. So there were more holes to throw to. There's a lot here that they need to evolve on or go back to and look at and say, what made Jalen so good in 2022? Let's try to do a little more of that. And it's not there. And that's one of the self-scouts I think needs to happen.
Is that player gone though, Scott? That's my worry. Because I've been tough on Jalen the last couple of weeks, just because I we talked about, we had Les Bowen on yesterday and we're talking about it, and I'm looking at the collapse of Wentz at, Wentz's big year. It looked like he could make no wrong decision. He had every athletic thing went his way. And, after that, it was a collapse. Jalen, 22, same thing. Every RPO, Jalen made the right move. Every play that Jalen was in, it almost was like the football gods casted a spell of magic on him. Now it's gone, and I'm like, is that player ever going to come back? Are we using him right? I'm concerned about Jalen Hurts. Are you ready to talk me off the ledge, or are you joining me on the ledge?
I'm walking towards the ledge. I think you brought up a lot of good questions that, number one, does he have the burst in those legs that he had after some of the injuries he's had and the hits he's taken? I don't know. Haven't seen it. Haven't seen him try to turn it on yet. I've seen him get outside and get a few yards and then shut it down and slide or fight for an extra yard or two, but I haven't seen him try to turn on that afterburner yet. Where is it, Jalen? You got to try. You got to go for it if it's there, and you got to take that. But it's the old adage of, is he trying to stay and be more of a throwing quarterback? Is he hate that knock of, and some will call it a knock. I think it's an added strength, an added tool to have if you can run and use it. The other thing is, the league is not stupid. And they saw what the Eagles did in 22, and these defensive coordinators said, okay, how are we going to stop the RPO when the Eagles do it? They figured it out in 23. Jalen didn't start to run as much last year because of I think he was trying to avoid some of the hits, and then he got a little banged up and wasn't running after that. So now they've seemingly, I think, looked at the Eagles and said, we're not that worried about the RPO anymore. And when the Eagles do it, let's be honest, how many times are they getting called for ineligible receivers downfield because guys don't know if he's passing or not?
Or Hurts makes the wrong decision.
Or right. And there's a lot. That's a loaded question. And here's my other thing that has me puzzled about Jalen. I really liked the addition of Kellen Moore. I wanted to see how Kellen would work with Jalen to evolve. I have not seen evolution. And it makes me wonder, is Kellen the problem or is Jalen the problem? Because if you're not evolving, and what's the common denominator, it's Jalen, then there needs to look his reads. We all talked about it. He needs to get better at seeing the field. He needs to get better at progressing through his reads. It's not happening. I'm still seeing the same guy trying to throw passes or hold on to the ball too long. That mental clock, yeah. I mean, it's a problem. It's not set properly, and he needs to figure that out.
Longest in the league right now, Scott. It's time to throw.
It's actually second.
Second to last.
Yeah. He's second, 3.1 seconds to throw for Jalen Hurts, which is second worst in the league. Now, interestingly, the worst is Brock Purdy, 3.14. The third worst is the NFC Offensive Player of the Month, Sam Darnold, 3.07. So it's not like you can't succeed. But if you think about the offenses Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold run, it's the same offense. It's the Shanahan Kubiak offense. Traditional play action, long developing routes. They're supposed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
He's not supposed to. He's not playing that style of offense. And if you go all the way back, people talk. You had mentioned the 4th and 1, and Nick, I thought that, boy, I said, boy, he opened a Pandora's box he didn't need to open. I thought the similar thing when Doug Nussmeier, I don't know if you remember, Scott, but he said 2.3 seconds. He actually used the number 2.3 seconds of the goal on getting the football out, which, by the way, is completely unrealistic. And Kellen Moore walked it back immediately. The leader, by the way, the leader in the entire NFL is Andy Dalton at 2.35. So even the leader isn't at 2.3. So to assume that Jalen Hurts could get to that level is insane. But he's got to be middle of the road. He's got to be 2.7, 2.8.
As long as he's in the my thing is too, John, as I was watching that game against Tampa, I just kept seeing escape routes showing themselves where he could extend the play out to the side, and he didn't take them. There were ways to extend that play. If you don't want to throw it, you want to try to make a play. Listen, you want to make a play, that's fine, but get towards the sidelines, out of the pocket where you can throw it away, no grounding, or have one of your extremely talented receivers when they're back. And I know he was shorthanded in the last game, but just extend the play and find a guy who improvises. I mean, that's sort of what happened with the Paris Campbell touchdown. But there were routes. There were ways for him to get out of that pocket, and he didn't take it. He stood in there too long, was too indecisive. And then by the time he, I think, wanted to try to escape, that hole had closed. So, and that's where I go back to, where is the film session? Where is the learning where you pause and you show him, here's what you didn't see. You had this, you could have done that. Where is that stuff in his evolution? Because I'm just not seeing it. And it's a stat. All stats are meant to be guides. You know, if he holds the ball for 3.5 seconds because he's extending those plays heading towards the sidelines, okay. You know, you're not getting sacked. You're not fumbling it or in a strip sack. You're not throwing interceptions. If all that's happening, this team will automatically be better. It's got to be a fact. I mean, you're not giving teams shorter fields. You're not taking points off the board where you're almost about to have them. He's got to be a lot.
You're right.
Better.
I like your thought on the stat aspect, because sometimes it's good to extend the play, and obviously that's going to skew Jalen Hurts' stats versus somebody like Brock Purdy is going to, simply throw from the pocket more often than not. But so I agree with you there. So to me, it comes down to when it's clear the ball is supposed to come out, it doesn't come out. I think that's the problem. And too often, if it's a timing route, if it's a trust route, too often the ball's not coming out on time. Like you see last night's game, Kirk Cousins was cooking. We talked about it before you came on. The ball's out on time before the break, throwing guys open. You just don't see that with Jalen Hurts. That's kind of the evolution you're hoping to get to. And I just don't see any evidence it's getting better.
Some of that, John, I will say, I think comes down to trust in receiver. And some of these other quarterbacks are willing to trust guys sooner than I feel Jalen is. I think he's finally there with Devontae and AJ, that if I know they're going to break here and I will throw it to that spot and they will be there. I feel like he feels that way with those two guys, which is where when we see open receivers that are not named, Devontae Smith or AJ Brown, he's slow to release the ball. And I think there's that trust that isn't there for whatever reason, that he doesn't trust those guys or have as much of a rapport with them. But your pros and other pro quarterbacks don't care who they are. If they're wearing a pro jersey, he's going to trust that guy. I think Cousins is one of those guys.
Yeah.
And you'll see him throw picks because I think he trusts guys sometimes too much that he doesn't. And Jalen isn't that guy. He's not there. And, he's got to find a way to get there. I mean, you are a pro quarterback. You are supposed to be a franchise quarterback. Lead by example. And when you throw that ball on time and it's supposed to be at a certain spot and the guy isn't there, not saying you cause a scene on the sidelines, but in those film sessions, in those meeting rooms, listen, man, I'm putting the ball where it's supposed to be. It is your job to be there. That kind of leadership. Or have some of the other receivers go up to him and say that. And I think that this team's missing some of that. And, they got to, and I mentioned it earlier. If this team doesn't score in the first quarter, they're not going to win a lot of games. It's just, you're playing from behind with a defense that is built to be able to play with the lead. And they aren't, that's coming down to it's an egregious problem with the opening scripted plays. And you know what? And I thought about that, and I was ready to blame Kellen Moore for some of that. Where is this scripted? I hear Jalen checking out of a lot of stuff at the line.
He's got way more autonomy. So that part, and that's something you wanted, and he's gotten. And
I'm questioning some of that. I'm wondering if there needs to be a little bit of a tighter leash on some of that, because I wonder how many times he's checking out of plays into things that are not, He has keys he's reading. He has things but privately behind the scenes, I wonder how many times or if Kellen Moore's getting frustrated with how much he's checking out of stuff.
It's a good point. Yeah.
I wonder if that's an explanation for why everybody's out there saying, it looks like Nick's offense. Me and John talk about it all the time, and John's like, it's not Nick's offense. But, some of the similarities do exist. And I'm not saying that Kellen calling it or that Nick's even interfering.
Yeah,
there's the quarterback, and that's where it is.
I was talking to Mike Gill, your buddy, Scott, yesterday about this very thing. And I asked him, and I'll ask you guys, as you just said, what's the common denominator? Everybody, Nick Sirianni, Shane Steichen, this and that, Brian Johnson, Alex Tanney, Doug Nussmeier, Kellen Moore, all these people you have problems with as a fan base. What is the common denominator between all of them? Jalen Hurts. At some point, you got to get to the core of it. And that the fact that so many people are so convinced, Scott Grayson, that Nick has taken over the offense in bad spots. And when it's good, it's the quarterback.
I will say I agree with you entirely. I will say Nick has made questionable decisions that he's left points on the board. Off the board
down, that's different. I'm saying offensively, Kellen Moore's making the game plan. That doesn't mean other people don't contribute. I think that is the Pandora's box that Nick opened that he shouldn't have opened, because
I love that reference.
Yeah. Well, because, Doug Peterson used to be honest about it. He used to tell us Press Taylor's responsible for red zone and Rich Scangarilla's responsible for 2 minutes. Every major offensive coach contributed to the game plan. Jeff Stoutland's obviously the run game coordinator. Then at the time that was Doug Peterson. When Nick was doing it, it would be Nick. And now it's Kellen Moore, and they're the final say. They get to say, all right, this is the game plan for the week. And, so basically what happened on that 4th and 1 play is they decided during the week that if they got in that type of situation, 4th and 1, they were going to roll out the fake tush push. And Nick is trying to protect Kellen Moore. He's like, that one's on me. That one's on me, which he should as the head coach. But this stuff is done during the week, and it's all put together. But he opened that box, and nobody wants to hear that context. Nobody.
No. And I think the best situation is to have, the more heads, the better, to a certain extent, where you're creating a game plan. And then once it gets to be in the game, but you have to have that understanding. That's where I go back to the audibles, the changing of the plays. Where are the guardrails on doing that? Are there any at all? It makes me wonder how all that is structured behind the scenes. Because listen, you go 1 or 2 weeks without scoring in the first quarter. Okay. Maybe it's just the other team's defense was that good and on you and ready to stop you in those. Okay, fine. But 4 weeks in a row and in 6 weeks, when you go back to the last 2 games of last year, that is a big problem. And I just think there's something that has, whether it's no checking out of plays, Jalen, on the first 2 drives, whatever it happens to be. Or, you don't check out of the plays until I give you the green light. Whatever it has to be, so that you can get something going. I mean, I just hear the checking happening at the line of scrimmage a lot lately, and it seems like it's happening more and more, which tells me he's completely throwing away whatever play call was there and going with whatever options are set up in his audible structure.
Which is generally, you basically kill from run to pass or vice versa. In most plays in the modern NFL have 2, and I apologize. I got all kinds of lawn work going around me. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but it's driving me crazy.
Just started coming through. It's fine though, John. You're good.
But so anyway, and they're supposed to not be here till 10, but I digress. So I'm going to be yelling at some people. But anyway, I digress. The point of the whole Jalen Hurts most plays are built in that way in the modern NFL. You basically kill from run to pass or pass to run. And, Tom Brady talks about this all the time, to his credit, and the two best ever were Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. Your job as a quarterback is to get the team in the right play. If you see something and it's obvious they loaded the box and they're going to stop the run, and you check out and you try to get the team into the best play possible. Is Jalen at that level to have that kind of autonomy? Probably not, but he wants it. He wants more after going through what Kellen Moore, what Jason Kelsey meant to that pass protection scheme. And that's why they brought in Kellen Moore to get this started, so to speak, and to get him up to speed with this kind of stuff. And maybe he's just not ready for it. But I think you're right, Scott. The common denominator is Jalen Hurts to all of this. And at some point, you got to stop thinking he's a shrinking violet and point these things out and say, look, this is not good enough. And I like Scott's idea, by the way. Maybe it's time to scale back. Maybe it's time to scale back to where it was. We say.
Yeah. Even just until you kind of get a rhythm going. Like this team has had in 4 games. Have you felt, even when it was going well at times, if you could even say it went well, they kind of lucked into some. Have you felt like there's been any kind of a rhythm yet, other than the fact that Saquon's going to kind of break one run at some point?
He's going to hit a home run. He got a home run hitter.
That's about it. So it's, other than that, I really haven't felt there's any kind of rhythm to this offense yet. So if you were to say, like you said, John, scale it back until a rhythm has been formed and found and it's getting a little bit more consistent, and then say, okay, slowly take the reins off a little bit, let him, have a little more autonomy again. Because now there comes a feel. You get a feel for the game better, a feel for your teammates, a feel for what it's like when you're in that rhythm, and you can go from there. That's a place where you can grow. But until you can get into that, you got to get that first step in the right direction first. And John, I think that's where they need to go. I think they need to, as you said, I like your phrase there, scale it back in terms of some of the autonomy and the freedom that Jalen Hurts has to get this offense, get the car running, right? Get it going from first into second gear and maybe second to third gear, and then let him start, feathering the gas pedal a little bit more. You got to do something different, definition of insanity. And I'm not seeing anything different through these first 4 games.
Scott, I want to ask about the defense here as we close out, get close to closing out the interview. One thing's guaranteed, and that's that the offense is going to look better after the bye week because A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Lane Johnson are coming back.
Right.
Well, the defense had everybody, and they didn't look too good. What's the fix on defense, Scott Grayson? How you feeling about the defense right now through 4 weeks?
I was, again, funny, I start with the coordinators, and I kind of digress from there in terms of calming myself down with who I'm mad at. It's like, I saw that defense, and it was obvious early in the game. Their game plan was Baker will not hold the ball. He is going to take his drop and get rid of it somewhere. And the Eagles were unable to get a pass rush as a result of that, which was brilliant on Tampa's part. And then also they kept dissecting that zone that the Eagles were running a lot. And I went back to then, this is where I was frustrated with Vic. I didn't see adjustments really. Again, we're sitting in a defense where there's no real bump and run or trying to get guys off the time. It's all timing when you're going to do that, right? It's obvious. The quarterback is on a timing with his receivers. He's going to drop back and let it go because by the time he hits that third step, my receiver's supposed to be here. Well, the only way you can kind of divert that is to run some sort of bump. You got to press those guys off of their routes. And you saw that when the Eagles got the touchdown to Paris Campbell. Dallas Goedert was bumped off his route and basically taken out of the play. And it was a little improvising there that caused the Eagles to find that touchdown. You got to do that a little bit with these guys. Baker was able to pick apart the Eagles because his first option was pretty much open when he had the timing route. And there was no adjustments to try to change the timing or to try to go into man, really, to try to divert some of that and keep from those holes opening up. And I feel like the linebackers were playing too shallow in those zones that were allowing those guys to have plenty of room to operate. They've got to fix that stuff up too. You're right. The guys were there. And there were 16 missed tackles in the game.
Yeah.
So that's where I go from Vic and say, listen, it's not, I can get frustrated a little bit with the setup and maybe not pressing those guys. But at the end of the day, there were opportunities to potentially get off the field, and they didn't make the tackles to do it. And that's on the players.
That is. I'm glad you brought that up. At S Grayson Box 29, because I think too often people want to blame the coaches. And when you do miss, and to the Eagles in-house accounting said 15. So it wasn't quite as bad as 16, but still 16, 15. If you're over 10, it's a bad day, Scott.
And I feel like, John, I don't know if you feel this way or not. To me, it's not a new problem. I know we talked about it with Nick and stuff a couple of weeks ago after a game where there were so, generous amount of missed tackles then too. So, other teams don't seem to be missing tackles like the Eagles are. So where is the problem? And I know in this new NFL, you're not hitting much during the week, if at all. But they have things called tackling dummies for a reason. And I think these guys really need to use them because they're not making the play. The technique isn't there. I see C.J. Gardner-Johnson diving at guys like Deion Sanders used to. Business decisions, go up and make the play.
With CJ, they lost the game, so everybody forgets. That 4th and 1 stop by CJ
Right.
Gardner-Johnson.
Awesome.
All-time stop in a big situation. If they would have went on and win that game, we'd be talking about that for years, I think. That was how good that stop was. How can a guy do that and then be it's unbelievable to me.
I agree. And when the Eagles were getting out, look, they're human beings, right? And I will give them this. If I was playing on that defense and I look up, I'm exhausted because it's hotter than heck out there. I've had to be on the field a lot because my offense can't get a first down. I look up and I see the total yards are 254 to nothing. I can't say I would start thinking about making business decisions myself. Because does it seem like your team's going to come back in that game in that moment? You're probably looking down the line going, yo, guys, you going to move the ball at all? Like, we need a break. We're hot. We're tired. We're exhausted. We've been on the field for 2/3 of the game so far. It's not saying it's okay. I'm not saying it's okay. They're professional athletes are getting paid. But trying to understand a little bit of the psyche and explain maybe what a C.J. Gardner-Johnson, how he can make that one play and then not those others. Man, I can't imagine how frustrated those guys were in that first half watching that offense.
Yeah, it's a complimentary game, man. And when you go 3 and out, but even that, and we criticize the slow starts, and rightfully so. There was the Dallas Goedert play we talked about.
Yeah,
Perfect
he makes that catch.
Perfect throw, make the catch. Execution's such a big part of it. But, even I'll give an homage to my old partner, Jody Mack. When you're struggling this badly and you win the toss, why not take the football?
Again, do something different. I agree with you. I wondered that myself. Especially if you have a slow start problem, at least that would limit one possession in the first half for the other team. I don't know. They got to do something different. And I look at this team, John, and I just think that, look, they're 2-2. The whole season is still they're not even a quarter of the way through this thing now that they're playing 17 games. And you can't write the book on this team yet. It's not even close to written. This division is wide open. I think there's a lot of parity in this league to the point where, it's going to be a lot of teams and tiebreakers that are going to decide some of these playoff spots. But a Falcons loss like you had, I'll give you this one. You were missing 3 starters on offense. That's fine. It is what it is. But you got to come out and show that we talk about the new NFL these days is the preseason is the first 4 games of the regular season. That's kind of the way I feel. Okay, preseason's over. But you guys didn't come out of it trending in the right direction. So you better fix a lot of things. And I think that's where this team's at. But I will say, you see some of the stuff going on with Slay. some of the things that are happening, the way these guys are behaving a little bit. They wanted to say last year was last year. I don't know how you feel, John, but when you're in that locker room, you're just around these guys. I'm the ones who were here. I feel like last year was not just last year. I feel like they're wondering and worrying that last year is continuing into this year.
Scott, are they going to turn this thing around?
The one thing I look at, Zander, that makes me feel optimistic is the schedule. As it turns out, right? Because you never truly know who these teams are. You think you do. That was a tough four-game stretch.
Yeah, it was.
Green Bay and Brazil. You survived that. Atlanta, you should have won that. But Atlanta's proving to be a better team than I think we thought. At least I thought coming in. So you go, okay, that team's legit. The Saints, you won that game. You look pretty good doing it. And then you come back and you lay a stinker against the Bucs with 3 of your top offensive players out. So what are you? I have no idea what this team's identity is at this point, but I will say going 2-2 through that stretch, if I didn't have to watch it, if I didn't have to see all that happened that led to it, if you told me they'd be 2-2 coming out, I'd go, all right, I was thinking 3-1, but 2-2 means you're right there.
Add in too if you didn't watch it. Hey, AJ Brown was missed 3 games too.
Right. And so, but then I look at, you got the Browns. What do you got? You got Browns, and then is it the Bengals?
Browns, Giants,
Bengals, and Jaguars. Those are 4 very winnable games to me. Very winnable games that if they can get this thing going, and then you talk about I talked about building a rhythm, building some momentum. I think there's a real opportunity in these 4 games to put the train on the track and start leaving the station here. But and part of it is because these 4 opponents, we are starting to see a little bit of what they are. And I think there's opportunities here for this team to turn it around. So if we said 4-game segments here after the next 4, if they go 3-1 in that and they're sitting here at 5-3, I think there's a lot of Eagle fans that would take that. I think these are 4 very winnable games, and I think it's possible they could be 6-2. But they've got a lot to figure out, and this bye week needs to be utilized in the proper way, and they need to come back ready to work. And I think those are the keys to kind of getting it right.
Scott, thanks for joining today, man. Great stuff. As always, appreciate it.
What about 3, Scott, over the next 4?
What's that?
The whole world collapses if they're 1-3.
Oh yeah. The line at the bench, and add into it if the Phillies don't win the World Series.
Oh man,
you got a long line.
You went too far. Add into it that the Phillies don't get by the Mets. That's what I'm worried about, Scott.
Wow. I know. You know what? The Mets had to empty the tank to get through.
Yeah, that's true. But they're a reserve team. That's a tough battle. So we'll see how that goes. Scott, and I will say they're winnable games, but they're also losable games. So
with this team, anything is possible.
That's true. Make sure you guys follow Scott on Twitter at @SGraysonFox29. Follow all his work. He does a great job for Fox 29. Scott, thanks, man. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, appreciate it, guys. You got it. Take care.
Good stuff from Scott Grayson there on Birds 365. I always enjoy getting Scott on. Give me a good dose of realism, optimism, and a little bit of Eagle pessimism as they
better get that pass rush going for Cincinnati because Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, man, if they're healthy.
I don't know who's covering Jamar Chase with this soft zone defense, Johnny Mac.
That one could be the one loss. But yeah, they need to come out of this next stretch 3-1. I agree with Scott. And if they're not 3-1, at least there's going to be some bad times on the horizon. But I do think, look, it's almost amazing to me how much this team changes with AJ Brown versus without AJ Brown. And it shouldn't be as drastic as it is, but it is. And when he's out there, that's a positive. They should be able to do a better job when he's not out there, but they aren't. And that's a problem. But to my, he was close to playing it, and he probably, if it were a playoff game, he would have played last week. So he's going to be back. And they're a different team when he's out there.
Yep, for better or for worse, they are a different team. John, any games that stick out to you for this weekend? Any games that you're super interested in? Let me look at the week 5 schedule. I looked at it a little bit. Nothing really jumped off.
Well, number one is Saturday morning because it's Aaron Rodgers against Brian Flores.
Wait, is it Saturday morning? No, Sunday morning.
Sunday morning. Sunday. Did I say Saturday?
Shit,
Sunday morning.
Yeah, Sunday morning.
I think that's so interesting because, we always talk about Brian Flores and the stuff that he's rolling out there. It's so different than everybody else. And I'm a big fan of that. But Aaron's seen it all, done it all. So that to me is a very interesting game. I want to see if the Ravens can keep it going. I think, they had the tough start, but I think they're one of the best teams in football.
That's a good game because the Eagles have both of those teams on the schedule coming up.
Yeah. So I'm interested in that game. The Commanders are playing the Browns this week. So you get 2 scouting reports. Yep. I think Eagles fans should be very interested in that game. You're going to get to see Cleveland up close and personal against.
And then Cowboys Steelers as well. That's another game that
Cowboys. That's the night game, right? Sunday night, I think. Yep. Cowboys Steelers. Steelers find ways to win. I don't know how. Well, other than obviously TJ Watt. So he's having a spectacular season. Those are I would say the most interesting games to me.
Good stuff, Johnny Mac. Great week of shows this week. I got a feeling I'm going to be more optimistic maybe next week. I'm not sure. It's a week-to-week league, so hopefully the Eagles can get it back. I thought we had a good week of shows today. I thought Scott Grayson was good. Appreciate everybody in the chat, especially our members and our super chatters. Lucius, the show is in here. A JAKIB Legend member, so thank you for being a Legend member, Lucius. We're going to take care of you. We always take care of all of our Legend members. I reached out to Terry Hayes. He was the first one, so it pays to be first. He's going to get a big thank you from JAKIB in a big way, and then Lucius as well. And I believe Jason A-Team is our other JAKIB Legend member. So if you're a Legend member, your support doesn't go unnoticed, and we appreciate that very much. And then James Carver with the super chats, Daniel Bigelow, Ann Martine, Alexander Harris, and Anthony Wilson. Appreciate all of you guys, man. Great support as always. Today, Johnny Mac, good show, man. I'll talk to you Monday morning. All right, brother?
All right. I got to go yell at some landscapers. Thanks, everybody.
Let him off the hook.
Yeah.
You got to let him off the hook.
Yeah. It's a bad job. All right. Enjoy the weekend, everybody.
Right, I'll see you, brother. All right, guys. Everybody, see you next time. I'll see you at 2 to 6 today. The National Football Show coming up this afternoon. See you there, everybody.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.